Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm going to be making another murder mystery makeup video today, but before I do start I just wanted to say something. What is happening in the world at the minute is just absolutely devastating, and I really don't want this video to come across as disrespectful, as rude. I really don't want it to hurt anybody's feelings. I know I don't have the biggest following on YouTube, but I have linked below a website that has loads of links where you can sign petitions for Black Lives Matter, and you can make donations and you can educate yourself on the Black Lives Matter movement. I just wanted to say that first and foremost. I don't want anyone to be offended by any of the content that I make. Anyway, today I am going to be doing another murder mystery makeup case, like I said, and today I'm going to be doing the unsolved murders of LISANNE, FROON and KRIS. Before I do start, I'm going to give just another little disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only, and I mean no disrespect when I'm talking about anyone in this video. I have put this video together from sources that I have found on the internet, and they are all linked in the description below. Right then, let's get on with the case. Also, I have pinky purple hair, I know. So this case is actually the one that got me into true crime. I was at uni and I saw a YouTuber called Bella Fiore make a video about this case, and I was just like, what? This is just the craziest, creepiest, spookiest, most disturbing thing ever. So that I should have also put that in the disclaimer. Today's video is going to be a bit spooky and a bit creepy. So KREMMERS and LISANNE FROON, they were two Dutch students, and they disappeared on the 1st of April 2014 while they were hiking in Panama. So LISANNE FROON, she was 22 years old. She was described as aspiring, optimistic, intelligent, and she was also a passionate volleyball player. LISANNE had just graduated with a degree in applied psychology. She was also a really big fan of Coldplay, and she kept a diary. She took that everywhere with her, and she actually called her diary Break Free. So KREMMERS was a year younger than LISANNE. She was 21 years old. She was open, she was creative, she was responsible, and she was reserved. People also described her as a little bit shy. She had striking strawberry blonde hair. It was almost verging on ginger, and she was into all things creative and artistic. KRIS had just completed her studies in cultural social education, specialising in art education. KRIS had already decided what she was going to do next with her life. She had already applied to study art history further. KRIS had a boyfriend, I think he was called Steven, and he lived in the Netherlands, and she also kept a diary. So these girls were both very smart. They both were trying to make good futures for themselves. They had things that they were really passionate and interested in. So a few weeks prior to these girls travelling around Panama, LISANNE and KRIS actually moved into a dorm room together. They also worked at the same cafe. They, knew each other, and they were really good friends. They'd both saved up money for 6 weeks so they could go travelling around Panama, and the idea was that they'd go travelling, they would also try and learn some Spanish, and they wanted to do some volunteering work in some schools. And the trip was supposed to be a reward for LISANNE on graduating. So, on the 15th of March 2014, the two girls arrive in Panama. A boat took them to a Panamanian island called Isla Colon, and when the girls arrived, they visited the coast of Panama and just kind of chilled out on the beach. They were kind of going to do a holiday first. The idea was at the beginning of their holiday, they would go, they would enjoy the beach, they would have food, drinks, they would learn some Spanish, they would sightsee, they would go dancing. So they spent their first couple of weeks just doing that. So the first couple of weeks for them flew by, and they had an absolutely amazing time. After those 2 weeks, they travelled to a little town called Phuket, and they arrived on the 29th of March. When they got to Phuket, they went to the children's school that they would be volunteering at, and apparently there'd been some mix-up. So the girls had been planning this holiday for ages. They made sure that everything was organised and they were ready to go into it. However, there'd been a little bit of a mix-up, and the appointments had changed. They got to the school, and the school basically told them they couldn't work there that week as planned. They would have to come back next week. Obviously, the girls were a bit miffed at this. They both even wrote in their diaries that I mentioned how annoyed they were. They'd been planning it for months. They were really excited about it, and they could have stayed at the beach in the seaside, like partying away or just like sightseeing, but they were in this like tiny little town. And they wanted to volunteer, you know, they were ready to do it. LISANNE especially didn't take this very well. She actually sent a text message to her parents saying, "I'm really very disappointed." So now they kind of had a week to kill in Phuket. So Phuket is a mountain town and it's known for its beautiful like outdoor environment, and it's covered in mountains and forests, and it's really, really beautiful. And the girls were actually staying with a host family, a local host family. These were basically just people who lived in the area, and they were going to put the girls up for their time there. So they go to visit the host family's house, and they go there and they're described by the host family as smart and shy. So on the first evening at the host family's house, KRIS was just in another room reading a book while LISANNE kept their host Miriam some company. LISANNE was saying to Miriam that she didn't know what she was going to do with their time there. They needed to come up with some activities that they could do for a week, while the school didn't want them. So Miriam had actually suggested another school they could look at, however they'd already tried there and were told, no, there's nothing you can do, we don't need anyone. Miriam also recalled that LISANNE was asthmatic. She kept complaining that she had a really sore throat and that she wasn't feeling very well. Anyway, with not that much to do, the girls decided that over the next few days they would just explore the area they were in. They were already there, they probably were like, cool, let's just make the most of the situation that we're in. So on the 30th of March, it was their second day in Phuket, Miriam brought the girls some breakfast, and then the girls spent the whole day just exploring the town and just kind of wandering around. There is actually photo evidence proof that the girls did this on Sunday, and they arrived back at the host family's house around sunset. So from what I've gathered from these girls, they really like organising things and kind of like planning what they're going to do. So soon enough, the girls had made a plan of all the things they were going to do with their week while they were in Phuket. They had planned to climb the local volcano, they were going to go see some coffee plantations and also visit a strawberry farm. But the first thing that the girls wanted to do was that they wanted to climb the Peony Trail. So the Peony Trail is a really famous path in the town of Phuket, which brings walkers to the summit of like this mountain peak. And it's like a really nice, beautiful walk through the forests, and there's like waterfalls, and it's a really beautiful walk. It's called the Pianista Trail, which literally translates into the piano player's trail. It was called this because of the way it climbs up the mountain like piano keys. The girls were getting pretty excited that they were going on this trail. The girls even posted it on their Facebook saying that they were going for a hike on the trail. KRIS texted her boyfriend, letting him know they were going on the trail. She was excited to go on it. So on Tuesday the 1st of April 2014, the girls set off and went to visit the trail. So apparently a taxi picked them up and took them to the trail because it was quite a walk to actually get to like the base of it. The taxi driver said he'd drop them off in the afternoon about 1:40 p.m, but this can't have been true because there's literally photo evidence later on that they were at the peak at about 1 p.m. So it was more likely he dropped them off about 11 a.m. That's just one of the inconsistencies with this story. Like, this story is just so crazy and weird, but it also just has like so many inconsistencies that just like don't add up. So enjoy that. At around 2 p.m, KRIS made contact with her boyfriend via her phone. I don't know if she texted him or called him, but she made contact. The girls were both wearing light clothing that day. They were both wearing shorts and little vest tops. They basically weren't planning to go out for a long trip. They just wanted to climb the hike, get to the summit, and then come back down. Other than their clothes, obviously, they brought with them a light backpack, one passport, some money, their mobile phones, and then a digital camera and a water bottle. They might have taken like a few like food and snacks with them, but apparently they didn't. I don't know where this information came from, but some people think they didn't take any food with them. Basically, they were dressed and ready for a short trip. So at the start of this trail, there's actually a little restaurant, and they actually ended up taking the restaurant owner's dog with them just for like safety. The restaurant owners basically wanted the girls to be okay, like these girls weren't experienced like hikers, and it wasn't a particularly dangerous trail, but they just wanted to make sure that they'd be okay, so they said, you can take our dog, he was called Blue, you can take him with you. So, a little bit later on, the restaurant owners got a little bit confused as the dog came back a few hours later without the girls. However, these are two like grown women, and the restaurant owners gave them the benefit of the doubt. They could have just gone somewhere, they could have just not seen them, so they'll give them until tomorrow and then they'll start, like, you know, actually having a look for them. The host family that they were staying with also got a bit concerned when the girls didn't come back that evening or night at all. It wasn't likely that the girls were going to be staying with anyone else, or, you know, they weren't sure what was happening. They thought it was just a little bit odd. So the next day, the girls were actually scheduled to meet up with a local guide for like a private walking tour around the national park. The girls, however, did not show up for this. So the tour guide actually went to the host family's house where the girls were staying to, you know, check up on them in case they were like sleeping or had forgotten about it. And of course, the girls weren't there either. This is kind of when people were starting to take it a little bit more seriously. The authorities were called and the girls' parents were also called. So the day after that, on Thursday the 3rd of April, some volunteers around the area, I think they were just some local farmers, they went up the trail to look for them. They'd still not come back. Also on that day, authorities did some aerial searches in helicopters just over the jungle and forest area, just basically to see, you know, if they could see anything. Unfortunately, the volunteer search group or the authorities found absolutely nothing. Families of KRIS and LISANNE, they hadn't heard from the girls since the 1st of April, and these were girls who generally kept their parents in the loop of what they were doing. They would constantly like give them updates on what they were doing and would text them and send them photos and stuff, so this was very out of character for both of the girls. The families obviously tried to message KRIS and LISANNE, just being like, we're so worried about you, please like call us back, but they got absolutely no response. On the 8th of April, their families actually went to Panama with some Dutch investigators, and there was also some cadaver dogs. So all of the authorities, all of the volunteers, all of the cadaver dogs, they went into the forest and they searched solidly for 10 days. And it's a big forest, there was a lot of area to cover, but they got so many people involved and they just did a continuous search as far as they could, as best as they could, for 10 days. They were also sending up flares at night time, just in case the girls were lost in the woods somewhere and they saw the flares and they knew that help was near. KRIS and LISANNE's parents, they ended up offering a reward of $30,000 US. However, this brought them absolutely no new information, like nothing. So authorities started interviewing people around the town, and apparently 5 people instantly came forward and said they had seen KRIS and LISANNE in the town on the day they went missing. However, all of these witnesses have been debunked because of some evidence that they found later, so all of the people who thought they saw them, they didn't actually. And then absolutely nothing happened for months. There were no like leads, there were no traces, no evidence, just absolutely nothing. However, on the 14th of June, a native woman to the area, she actually discovered a backpack that was on the side of a riverbed and immediately took it to the police. It ended up being found out this was LISANNE's backpack. So the woman who actually found this backpack, she actually found it on the side of the riverbed where she would grow crops. So she would visit this place quite frequently, and she swore that this backpack had not been there the day before. This backpack was also found a 14-hour walk from where the girls were last seen. I'm gonna have to read this. So inside the backpack there were 83 American dollars, LISANNE's passport, KRIS's medical insurance card, there were 2 pairs of sunglasses, KRIS and LISANNE's phones, there was the camera, an empty water bottle and 2 bras. There was nothing else. There was no key to where they were staying, which some people thought was a bit suspicious. Also, everything was in amazing condition. It wasn't wet, which was really concerning. It was found right next to the riverbed. You'd think maybe like it had been washed up the stream. It's completely dry. Everything was in perfect condition, not even damaged at all. So allegedly there were 34 fingerprints found on the backpack and like the contents of the backpack. There were 13 fingerprints on the backpacks, there were 12 on the camera and the phones, and there was also 6 different ones on the bras. So researchers discovered that 2 of the fingerprints were from 2 unknown women, and 1 DNA sample contained genetic material of 2 unknown persons, of which at least 1 is of a male. The backpack and the bras also showed traces of leaves and soil material. However, the Dutch Forensic Institute failed to determine the source of these plants for a lack of reference. Also, the fingerprints, the leads and stuff they found, they were never investigated further. I don't know why, maybe they just didn't think it was like would lead to anything, or just like, I don't know, who knows, who knows. We're gonna get into the creepy parts now, so beware. So in the backpacks there were obviously their phones and their cameras, so obviously they were gonna look into what they could find on there, and boy, it's pretty creepy. So I'll start off talking about what they found on the phones, because honestly that's less creepy, but still creepy. So when researchers started looking at the data on the phones, it was pretty clear from not very far into the trek that the girls were kind of in some trouble. So around 4:39 p.m, it was still light at this point, the girls made the first attempt to call the emergency services. Around 10 minutes later, a second attempt was made. The girls were using the Dutch emergency telephone number, which, you know, it should have worked, but clearly they were just having some issues with the signal. A little bit later on, they actually dialed 911, which is the American emergency number. This would have also worked in Panama, however, it just didn't go through. So the calls weren't going through, and the girls decided to switch their phones off. They then turned them on 14 hours later. I don't know about you, but that is quite a long time to leave your phone off. Like, if I was out in the middle of nowhere, I would just be ringing and ringing and ringing. I probably wouldn't turn my phone off at all. In the days that followed, there would be several more attempts to phone the emergency services. So on day 2 of their appearance, so this is Wednesday the 2nd of April, calls were made at 6:58 a.m, 8:14 a.m, 10:53 a.m, and 1:56 p.m. Both of the phones were used alternatively. This is also the only day where their phones managed to get through for the shortest, slightest amount of time. During the first call attempt that morning at 6:55 a.m, Lisa's Samsung phone had managed to make a connection to an emergency number for 1 to 2 seconds. The connection was lost again, and then the phone was switched off not long after. I will just mention it now. So LISANNE had a Samsung Galaxy phone, I think it was, and KRIS had an iPhone. Over an hour later, KRIS's iPhone attempted to call 112. 112 is the Dutch emergency telephone number. While she was making this call, a screenshot photo was taken. I don't know if she meant to do this, maybe it's just like a slip of the hand. I know, I'm aware, I will accidentally take a screenshot if I'm like fiddling around with my phone. Happens all the time. So between the last call of day 2 and the first call of day 3, there was 19.5 hours where just nothing happened with the phones. How weird is that? After the 19.5 hours, there was then a string of attempts just to find a reception signal. The phones never made a connection there, and over the time the phones were used less and less to call the emergency services. Maybe they just gave up, maybe they were trying to, you know, think about it logically. We can't get through to anyone, we need to think of something else. Which is fair enough, it's probably a good way to think about it, but if I was in that situation, I would just be ringing and ringing and ringing non-stop. So apparently they kept on being switched off and on again, now and again. And then on day 5, the battery of the Samsung phone, so LISANNE's phone, the battery dies and the phone was no longer in use after that. KRIS's iPhone, however, surprisingly, weirdly, it hadn't run out of charge yet. It kept on being switched on and off until the 11th of April. Bear in mind, they went missing on the 1st of April. And you know, that's really surprising for an iPhone. A lot of people are like really weirded out by this because I'm sure we're all aware iPhone's battery life absolutely sucks. Also, Dutch forensic investigators have confirmed that on the 1st of April, both of the phones had only 50% charge on them. So how on earth did they last until the 11th? I have no idea. So we're going back to the 6th of April now. So LISANNE's Samsung Galaxy had died, but there were suddenly multiple attempts to activate KRIS's iPhone. However, the wrong PIN code was entered several times. The correct PIN code would never be entered again. The phone was never actually like unlocked properly again. Between the 7th and the 10th day, KRIS's iPhone just wasn't used at all. However, on the 11th of April, KRIS's iPhone was switched on again at 10:51 a.m. It stayed on for an hour. So like I said before this, the correct code had been used every single time up until the 5th of April. The last time it was used was 1:37 p.m. From that time onwards, the iPhone never got the correct PIN code again. There were some attempts at emergency calls, after, you know, the correct pin code couldn't be entered anymore or something, but the phone itself was never physically unlocked, if that makes sense. Between the 7th and 11th of April, 77 emergency calls were made and not a single one connects. So finally, on the 11th of April, KRIS's iPhone is turned on at 1:51 a.m. and then it is turned off at 11:56. The phone is never turned on again. So that is all the information about the phones and the data on the phones. However, there's still the footage that was on the digital camera. So the girls had this Canon digital camera and they had basically taken pictures of the whole trip, and there's actually pictures of the girls at the peak of the trail. They're looking happy, they're smiling, doing a thumbs up. So when the camera was found, they obviously looked at the camera's battery and there was still some battery life in the camera. It hadn't completely run out. There were also 133 photos on the camera. The camera, it didn't have a GPS on it, so they weren't able to track where it had been. So the first photos on the 1st of April show the girls walking up the trail. They took around 8 photos when they reached the peak of the trail, and throughout the trail and when they're at the peak, the girls look happy. There doesn't seem to be an issue with anything. They just seem to be having a great time. The photos after this, they just get a little bit creepy, disturbing. A little side note, but when I was actually researching this story the other day, it really freaked me out, and the part that I'm going to talk about now is the part that freaks me out the most, and I don't know why, but it just absolutely, it just gives me the creeps. So, you know, if you're scared of creepy things and stuff like that, I recommend you just stop watching and save yourself some nightmares. So the photos that follow, originally they just show the girls walking further into the trail, and this is kind of one of the theories about what actually happened to the girls, why they went missing. Some people think that they walked further on into the trail and they accidentally left the trail completely and then they just got lost. Apparently one of the pictures shows the girls crossing over into another continent. I'm not sure if that is 100% true though. At 2 p.m. the photos show the girls in the river. They look happy, they look absolutely fine. However, if you remember me saying earlier, KRIS made contact with her boyfriend at around 2 p.m. So I assume they're still close enough to the peak of the trail where they have some telephone service. Telephone service? What am I 80? After the photos of the girls just in the water, the camera is turned off for 7 days and absolutely no pictures taken, no activity at all. The camera is then finally used again on the 8th of April and it is nighttime. So these nighttime photos, they are unexplained and they're just creepy as heck. They just creep me out so much. These photos were also taken more than a week after these girls had gone missing, which adds to the creepiness. There were 90 photographs taken between 1 and 4 a.m. So on average, 1 photo was taken every 2 or 3 minutes for 3 hours. Only a handful of them have been released to the public, and apparently the ones that haven't been released apparently show nothing or show nothing but darkness. The photos themselves, they all use the flash and they all show flashlit jungle, plantations and rocks. There are a couple of photos that show very clear things, but the majority of the photos, they kind of show the same environment, with the same characteristic rocks and trees again and again. A lot of people think this was some sort of code that the girls were trying to do, because the photos tend to go from this position to this position, back to this position. They thought maybe there was some sort of pattern in the photos. You know, there are certain places that were just coming up repeated over and over again. So there's this one photo that looks down over some bushes and it's been enhanced, and apparently you can see the outline of a body, but I don't know, I don't really see it, but you never know. All of the photos that were taken were pictures of rocks and trees and stuff, apart from this one photo, and it's the back of KRIS's head. You can clearly see it's her head because of her strawberry blonde hair. Apparently you can see some blood matted in it. I couldn't really see it myself, but I don't know. Also on the night of the 8th, it was heavily raining and KRIS's hair is absolutely dry, so it must mean they found some shelter somewhere. There was this one photo of a like twig or stick that was just like sitting on top of a rock, and it had little bits of red plastic bag tied around like the tip of the stick. Some people think maybe this was some sort of where they would like signal to helicopters if they saw the helicopters like flying overhead. Like, it definitely doesn't look like it would have been used for some sort of weapon. It was just like a tiny little stick. There was also some evidence that a photo was actually deleted off of the memory card, which is weird because why would you bother? So there are a few different theories about why there were so many photos, like 90. That's a lot of photos. So some people think that they were trying to light their way with the flash. I personally don't believe in this idea because everyone knows you take a flash and it kind of blinds you. I think they would, you know, have realised after a few photos that it just wasn't lighting their way at all. There's also the theory that they were trying to maybe scare away an animal that was freaking them out. I don't think that's, you know, a terrible theory. They were in a jungle, it was pitch black, they were probably scared. I mean, they were definitely scared. This was also the night that people were sending flares up while they were looking for them, so they could have been using the camera's light to like maybe send some flashes back. There's also a creepy theory that KRIS and LISANNE didn't actually take these photos and someone else was with them and did. That freaks me out. And then after that night the camera was turned off and never used again. So that's it for the camera and the phones. Creepy. After the backpack was found, police obviously decided to investigate around the area and see if they could find anything else. The search led to finding KRIS's shorts being found. They were zipped up and apparently they were folded up neatly on top of a rock. The shorts were found 8 walking hours from where the backpack was found. So originally it was said that the shorts were about an 8-hour walk from where the backpack was found, but Dutch police kind of estimated because of the difficult terrain and because of their exhaustion, it would have been more of a 14 hours walk. And then for 2 months, there was absolutely nothing and no more evidence, just went cold again. So 2 months after the backpack had been found, on the 19th of June, police started to find human bones in the forest. Originally the police found a pelvis bone and they actually found a boot, and inside the boot was just a whole foot. Apparently the boot thing isn't that uncommon because you know, if something happens to someone, the boot will protect the flesh inside of the boot, so usually the boot is the first thing to be found. The foot that was inside the boot, it was actually in really, really good condition. It wasn't injured, there were no like cuts, teeth, claw marks in the foot, nothing. It was, you know, apart from it being a severed foot, it was in good condition. The boot and the foot was soon proven to belong to LISANNE. There was a riverbank near where the bones had been found, and there was also at least 33 widely scattered bones. Most fragments of the bones came from one left leg that also belonged to LISANNE. So the pelvis bone that they found, first of all, it had been like broken in half, and secondly, it was completely clean of all flesh, like it's literally shiny. The bone was soon proven to belong to KRIS, and eventually a rib bone from KRIS was also discovered. So then on the 29th of August 2014, more things were found in the jungle. They found more scattered remains, and they actually found a rolled up ball-shaped piece of tissue that turned out to be skin. It was actually KRIS's skin, so this is really strange. But a forensic pathologist studied the skin, and they actually found out that it was still in its early state of decomposition. This was weird because they literally found KRIS's pelvis bone that had been like completely down to the bone, devoid of all flesh. Upon looking further into KRIS's pelvis bone, they kind of saw it gave off a look that it had been bleached. I don't know what they mean by bleached exactly, I don't know if they mean sun bleached, but I think they refer to it just being like, you know, how shiny they were. It was weird. So the pathologist who was also looking into KRIS's skin found that in LISANNE's bone marrow in her femur and tibia bone, it was dry and it wasn't decomposed. The bone marrow was intact and unaltered. There were some weird things going on with the bones, like LISANNE's foot had a normal decomposition process, but the pelvis bones and all the other bones that were found were bleached. There were also no discernible marks on the bones, so no signs of stabbing or shootings. There were also no like animal marks on them, so clearly the flesh hadn't been eaten by wild animals. Apparently experts even said themselves it was unusual for their bodies to have decomposed that much already. They shouldn't just be bones at that point. There had been many bodies found in this jungle before this event, and they had been out in the environment longer than LISANNE and KRIS had been, and their bones just weren't like that. People were starting to get really suspicious on like the decomposition process, on why it had been so quick, and why their bones were just like bleached clean. Apparently the theory that the bones had been bleached was never like looked into, and they never actually tested the soil around where the bones were found. I don't know if they just thought, like, they're not bleached and this is just natural, or what. I don't know. There was this really weird theory. Apparently Mexican cartels, when they kill people, they bleach people's bones. So there's some conspiracy theories that think the Mexican cartel killed the girls. But if that was the case, why would they do that? It doesn't really make sense to me. So the main theory that the authorities were kind of behind was that the girls were actually killed by wild animals. This could be true, like this could be something that actually happened. It just makes it so weird, like there were no marks on the bones and the bones looked bleached. The statements authorities released was that they had been dragged to death into the river. That's what authorities thought had happened. And it kind of explains how their bodies got from one place to another place in a short amount of time, like potentially they were carried up the river. However, everything was dry. There's another theory that a potential killer was around the area, dragged them off, killed them and scattered their bones around, and bleached the bones to get rid of the evidence. I don't think this is true because they were making phone calls for a further week, so unless, they were killed by someone at the end of the week, like I think originally they just got lost. I think they could have genuinely got lost in the trail and then maybe injured somehow or just couldn't find their way back, and then from there on, I just have no idea. In 2016, there were 2 female teachers that went missing for 10 hours. They were found at 3 AM in the pitch black, and by this point, they had suffered from dehydration, hypothermia, and exhaustion. How on earth did these girls last, like, more than a week? They were wearing, like, shorts and vest tops, and they didn't have any food with them, and they had 1 bottle of water, like, what? And that is it. No one knows what happened. It is still to this day an unsolved case, and I honestly think we'll just never know what happened. So before I wrap this up, I just have some questions for you guys. What do you think happened? Why do you think they took 90 photos in the space of 3 hours? Why was their backpack completely dry, even though it was found next to a river and kind of looked like it had been washed down the river? How the heck did they survive for so long? That just absolutely stumps me. And why do you think their bones were bleached, if they were bleached? Why do you think they looked bleached? Those are some of the questions that really kind of make me just wonder about this case. It's just crazy. This case has confused me forever, and I just cannot wrap my head around it. It just confuses me. So if anyone's got any theories, I would love to hear them. Anyway, that is everything for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Remember, I've put in the description box below where you can sign petitions for George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And I guess I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!